The child's first sound was not a cry, but a hum. Lyra's entire world narrowed to the tiny, warm weight in her arms, swaddled in a patched thermal blanket. The baby's skin was the color of moonlit quartz, shimmering with the faint bioluminescent tracery of her alien heritage. But her eyes, now slowly blinking open in the dim, red light of the derelict freighter's medbay, were a deep human brown. Eyes that saw her, truly saw her, for the first time. 3 days. It had been only 3 days since the Cathari slavers, their chitinous faces impassive, had pushed her into the rust-stained hold of this very ship, listing her defect on the manifest with a cold, digital chirp. Item 77, Velen female, certified infertile, utility-grade labor. They had sold her for scrap value. And now she was a mother. A resonant seismic thud echoed through the ship's corroded hull, making the loose wiring overhead sway. Dust sifted down like gray snow. The red emergency lights pulsed once, twice, casting long, frantic shadows. They were found. From the corridor outside, the sound of heavy, purposeful boots, human boots, approached, followed by the distinctive, angry whine of a plasma rifle powering up. Lyra's heart, so full a second ago, clenched into a cold knot of terror. She pulled the humming child closer, her own silvery tears falling onto the blanket. She had just found a universe of love in this tiny hybrid life, and now the man who had given her this miracle was coming to take it all away, or die trying. 1 standard week earlier, the gardens of Selen Prime. From orbit, Selen Prime was a jewel. Continents were etched not with the chaotic sprawls of human cities, but with vast, intricate geometric patterns, living tapestries of bioluminescent flora that pulsed with soft, rhythmic light. The Velen people cultivated beauty the way humans cultivated industry. Their cities were open-air arboretums, their homes grown from guided crystal, their lives a serene symphony of aesthetic philosophy and gentle commerce. Lyra tended the echo vines in the western spiral of her family's atrium. Her long, slender fingers, each tipped with a faint opalescent nail, carefully pruned a wilting leaf. The vine, sensing her intent, emitted a grateful cord-like sigh. She was small for a Velen, her frame delicate, her skin holding the pale, pearlescent sheen of her lineage marked by the soft, silver dermal patterns that curled from her temples down her neck like frozen tears. Her eyes, large and luminous, were the color of twilight, a mix of indigo and silver. To an outsider, it was a life of idyllic peace. To Lyra, it was a gilded cage of quiet disgrace. Her infertility wasn't just a medical condition, it was a spiritual void. For the Velen, whose connection to life and growth was the core of their identity, to be unable to propagate the familial biosong, to co-create new life, was to be a broken instrument in a perfect orchestra. The looks from her clutch siblings were not unkind, but they were laden with a pity that was colder than scorn. Her mother's touch had grown hesitant, her father's conversations purely pragmatic, about vine yields and energy quotas. The delegation from the Orion Trade Compact arrives tomorrow. Her father, Kalen, said, his voice a soft murmur like wind through crystal reeds. He stood at the archway, his own patterns glowing with a calm, steady light. Your presence at the welcoming ceremony is optional, Lyra, given the circumstances. The circumstances, the great unspoken. Her flaw, the compact dealt in resources, art, and, though never stated so crudely, biological agreements. Marriage alliances were a prized commodity, a way to weave new genetic melodies into the family song. Lyra was a silent note. I understand, Father, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The echo vine she touched resonated with a tremor of shared sadness. The OTC delegation was a jarring spectacle of crude, pragmatic power. Amidst the flowing silks and gentle light of the Velen, they moved in sharp angled, dark uniforms, data slates clicking, comms buzzing with terse updates, and among them was him. Captain Jackson Reed was a splinter of darkness in the luminous hall. He stood a full head taller than the tallest Velen, his frame broad and solid where they were willowy, his movements economical and tense where theirs were fluid. He wore the simple, fatigue-style uniform of a private security contractor, the OTC insignia faded on his shoulder. His face was all hard lines and weathered planes, a map of old conflicts with a scar that bisected his right eyebrow. But it was his eyes that arrested Lyra, a deep, tired brown. They scanned the room not with wonder at its beauty, but with tactical assessment, exit points, potential threats, defensive cover. A human veteran, a soldier in a garden. He looked utterly, profoundly alone. Their eyes met across the fragrant space. For a second, the ambient music of the chamber seemed to mute. In his gaze, she didn't see pity. She saw a recognition of isolation that mirrored her own. Then a junior delegate asked him a question. The moment broke and he turned away, the wall slamming back down. Later that night, the family conclave's decision was delivered, not in the great chamber, but in her private bower. Her father could not meet her eyes. "The compact has made a generous offer for a cultural liaison," he said, studying a hovering data orb. "They require a Velen of manageable status to assist with xenobotanical acquisitions on the fringe worlds. It is a position of honor." The words were hollow. They both knew the truth. The OTC representative had discreetly inquired about underutilized assets. Her family, to maintain its harmony, its perfect song, was selling her. The certification of her infertility, a private sorrow, had become a line item on a contract, lowering her acquisition cost. The next morning, as the pale triple moon still hung in the lavender sky, Lyra was escorted not to a diplomatic shuttle, but to a grimy Cathari merchant barge, hovering on illegal repulsors behind the biodomes. Her personal effects were a single small pod containing a change of robes and a solitary, dormant lament blossom seed, the only thing she'd taken from her gardens. Her family stood at a distance, their patterns dimmed with a shame they would soon rationalize away. Only her youngest clutch sister, Ilara, dared to run forward, pressing a smooth, warm resonant stone into Lyra's hand. "So you remember the song," she whispered before being pulled away. As the barge's ramp closed, sealing her in the smell of ozone and alien musk, Lyra saw Captain Jackson Reed on a nearby OTC observation platform. He was watching the transaction, his expression unreadable. Did he see another piece of cargo being traded, or did he for a second see her? The barge lurched into the sky, and Selin Prime, the beautiful, cruel jewel, shrank away to nothing. The Kaledo, a retired deep space hauler, was a symphony of rust, groaning metal and despair. The Cathari, insectoid beings with multifaceted eyes and clicking mandibles, were efficient slavers. Lyra was processed, scanned, and her infertile designation was stamped onto a wristband with a cold, brand-like heat. She was placed in a hold with a dozen other units, a haggard Tavian miner with broken feathers, a pair of silent cyber-augmented laborers from a fallen colony, others whose spirits seemed already extinguished. The air was thick with the smells of fear, unwashed bodies, and industrial coolant. Her days were a blur of menial tasks, scrubbing filtration ducts, sorting worthless scrap, preparing unidentifiable protein paste. The Cathari were not needlessly cruel, just utterly indifferent. She was a tool that spoke. At night, curled on a thin pad, she would clutch the resonance stone. It would glow faintly, emitting a ghost of her family's biosong, a melody that now felt like a taunt. She was an exile from beauty, adrift in a metal purgatory. Then on the third day, the Kaleido shuddered violently. Alarms blared in sharp atonal shrieks. Through the hull, they heard the unmistakable thunder of magnetized plasma cannon fire, the crump of explosive decompression. The ship was under attack. Pirates or rival slavers. Panic erupted in the hold. The Tavian shrieked, beating against the sealed door. The lights died, replaced by the hellish strobe of emergency beacons. Then with a deafening boom, the main hatch to their hold was blasted inward, melting around the edges. Smoke poured in, and through it stepped a figure clad in matte black, lightweight combat armor, helmeted, holding a compact, vicious-looking rifle. The human, Jackson Reed. He moved with a predator's grace, his helmet's visor scanning the room. "Anyone who wants out, stay behind me and do exactly what I say." His voice was filtered, gruff, utterly commanding. "Anyone who gets in my way gets left behind." He wasn't there for them. This was clear. He was a one-man boarding party, moving with a specific deadly purpose. He gestured sharply, and the prisoners, spurred by instinct, fell in behind him. Lyra, moving on numb legs, joined the ragged line. They became his accidental shield, his chaotic cover as he fought his way through the Kaleido. It was a nightmare of flickering shadows, the buzz of Cathari energy weapons, and the concussive roar of Jackson's rifle. He fought with a chilling, economical precision. He didn't waste a shot, didn't make a superfluous move. Lyra watched him put a plasma bolt through the central eye cluster of a Cathari guard, then use the body as a pivot to shoot another around a corner. He was a machine of violence, yet he constantly herded the prisoners, shoving them into alcoves, barking orders, "Down! Move!" That saved their lives. They reached a secondary hangar bay. A sleek angular shuttle, his, presumably was clamped to the deck, its engines humming. A firefight raged at the far end between surviving Cathari and what looked like pirate scavengers in mismatched gear chaos. "Get to the shuttle, now!" Jackson yelled, laying down covering fire. The prisoners scrambled. Lyra ran, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was almost to the ramp when a stray shot from the pirate side struck a power conduit above her. It exploded in a shower of sparks and molten metal. A searing pain ripped across her side, and she was thrown to the deck, the world spinning. Through a haze of pain, she saw Jackson turn. He saw her fall. For a heartbeat, she was certain he would turn away. One injured, infertile alien slave was not worth the mission. His helmeted gaze locked on her. Then, with a curse she heard even over the din, he broke cover, sprinting toward her through a hail of fire. A plasma bolt grazed his shoulder plate, spinning him halfway around, but he didn't stop. He reached her, his armored hand closing around her arm with a grip like steel. "I've got you," he grunted, the filter making his voice robotic, but the strain was human. He half dragged, half carried her up the ramp. Just as a pirate, rocket struck the shuttle's docking clamp. The blast wave threw them both into the shuttle's cabin as the ramp sealed. Jackson scrambled to the pilot's chair, his fingers flying over the controls. The shuttle detached with a lurch and shot out of the dying Kaleido like a bullet, weaving through debris and laser fire into the cold freedom of open space. Silence, broken only by the shuttle's hum and the ragged breathing of the survivors. Jackson slowly removed his helmet. His hair was dark, cropped short, sweat beading on his brow. The scar over his eye seemed more pronounced. He looked back at his unwanted passengers, his expression one of profound irritation. Then his eyes found Lyra, clutching her burned side, her silver blood seeping through her robes. He sighed, the sound heavy with exhaustion. "Med kit's in the compartment behind you," he said to no one in particular, before turning back to the controls, setting a course into the deep, uncharted fringe. The shuttle, which he called the Wanderlust, was cramped but orderly. He said little. He distributed ration packs, treated the Tavian's injured wing with detached competence, and pointedly ignored the grateful tears of the others. He was a closed system. When he finally tended to Lyra's burn, his touch was clinical, efficient. The antiseptic hissed against her wound, and she flinched. "Hold still," he murmured, his voice closer now, raw. He applied a synth skin patch. His fingers, calloused and scarred, brushed her pearlescent skin. A strange static charge seemed to pass between them. He looked at her, really looked, for the first time since the garden. "Lyra, right?" "The cultural liaison." She nodded, unable to speak. He knew what she was. He'd seen her sold. "Read Jackson," he offered, a minimal gesture. "We'll drop the others at the next Freeport." "You—" He trailed off, studying her. "Where's your family?" "They sold me," she said, the words tasting of ash. A muscle twitched in his jaw. He gave a slow single nod. "Yeah, families do that." There was a universe of old pain in those 4 words. He didn't ask why. He just finished the bandaging and returned to the pilot's chair. A solitary planet orbiting his own gravity well of silence. Over the next 2 days, a fragile, silent understanding grew. He was a man haunted. She saw him in the cockpit late during the ship's night, staring at the starfield, a single, worn holopick in his hand, a smiling human woman and a child. He would touch the image, his face a mask of grief so profound it was physically painful to witness. She didn't ask. He didn't offer. She in turn tried to make herself useful, organizing the small living space, using her botanical knowledge to tend a small, hydroponic herb kit he had neglected. One evening, as she carefully pruned a leafy shoot, he watched her from his seat. "You're good with that," he said, the first unsolicited observation he'd made. "It isn't what I was," she said softly, "before." He was quiet for a long time. "I was a father before." The confession hung in the air, stark and vulnerable. A malfunction in the orbital shuttle's descent thrusters. A cheap pirated nav chip some idiot had installed to save credits. They were coming down to meet me on my shore leave. The shuttle. It just dropped out of the sky. They didn't have a chance. He closed his fist around the holopick. The garden world. Celine Prime. It was supposed to be my last contract. A quiet job before I checked out for good. Lyra's heart ached for him. His loss was a sudden violent rending. Hers was a slow ceremonial suffocation. Both were forms of death. She reached into her small pod and took out the dormant lament blossom seed. She held it in her palm and, with a focused thought, channeled the faint bio-song from her resonance stone into it. Slowly, impossibly, the hard, dark seed began to swell. A tiny silver-green shoot emerged, coiling like a question mark in her hand. It was a gesture of life, of fragile hope, offered to the most hopeless man she'd ever met. Jackson stared at the sprouting seed, then at her face alight with a soft, inner glow as she used her gift. The hard lines of his face softened just for a moment. He didn't smile, but the terrible emptiness in his eyes receded a fraction. He reached out a tentative finger, touching the tiny shoot. "It's beautiful," he breathed. In that moment, two shattered souls in a tiny ship between the stars found a crack in each other's armor. It wasn't love, not yet. It was the recognition of shared damage, a silent pact of mutual wounded understanding. He had saved her life. She had, in a small way, reminded him that beauty still existed. The free port of Tarnished Haven was a cancerous growth on an asteroid, a jumble of pressurized habitats, blinking neons, and ships of dubious registry. Jackson offloaded the other former slaves, securing them passage with a surprisingly reputable for the fringe relief agency. He paid for it from his own funds, a fact he didn't mention. Lyra watched from the Wanderlust's viewport. Seeing the first flashes of hope on their faces, he returned, his expression grim. "You're not staying," she stated, more than asked. "No," he said, powering up the engines. "The Cathari won't forget the ship I took. The OTC might be looking too. We need to disappear deeper." The word sent a warm shock through her. They jumped through a succession of non-aligned systems, through nebulae that painted the viewport in ethereal colors past dead worlds and pulsars. The closeness in the shuttle grew. They spoke more. He told her of growing up on a gritty Martian colony, of joining the Earth Commonwealth Marines, of the wars fought over resources he never cared about. She spoke of the biosymphonies of Cell and Prime, of the meaning behind each patterned leaf, of the deep, silent loneliness of being a void in a world of creation. They were from different galaxies, culturally, biologically, yet their sorrows harmonized in a strange, melancholy duet. One night, after a near miss with a pirate patrol that left them both adrenalized and sleepless, they found themselves sitting on the floor of the main cabin, sharing a hydration pack. The ship's systems hummed around them. The tension was a live wire. It was Jackson who broke, his restraint finally shattering. He looked at her, his brown eyes holding not pity, not just understanding, but a raw, desperate need. "Lyra, He stopped, struggling. "I am so tired of being alone." She reached out, her silver-patterned hand touching his scarred cheek. It was an electric connection. He leaned into it, closing his eyes. When he opened them, the wall was gone. What remained was just Jackson, vulnerable and real. He kissed her. It was not gentle, but it was not rough. It was hungry, a confession of need that words could never convey. She responded with a passion that surprised her, a release of all the locked-away feeling, all the undesired love she had carried for so long. That night, in the quiet hum of the ship, two lost people found a temporary harbor in each other. It was an act of mutual healing, a balm on ancient wounds, a defiance against the cold universe outside. The next morning, a new, easy intimacy existed. He smiled, a real, unguarded smile that transformed his face. She laughed, a sound like chimes she hadn't heard from herself in years. For a few days, the Wanderlust felt like a home. They talked of finding a quiet planetoid, of growing a real garden, of a future that seemed, for the first time, not just possible but wanted. Then Lyra fell ill. It began as a profound fatigue, a deep ache in her bones. Then came the waves of nausea. She dismissed it as stress, as biosystem adjustment. But her Velen physiology was precise. This was wrong. She ran a basic medical scan from the shuttle's kit, her hands trembling. The results flashed on the screen. She stared, her mind refusing to parse the data. Bioscan analysis. Subject Velen female. Genetic markers standard. Additional markers detected human class. Male proximity. Jackson Reed. Reproductive status gestation confirmed. Estimated conception 72 to 96 hours prior. Developmental rate accelerated anomalous. The world tilted. The hum of the ship became a roar in her ears. Infertile. The word that had defined her, exiled her, sold her, certified by the finest Velen biomancers. A fundamental truth of her being. And yet, the screen glowed undeniable. She was pregnant. With Jackson's child. A human Velen hybrid, conceived just days ago, yet the scan indicated a developmental stage weeks ahead. It was impossible. It was a miracle. It was terrifying. "Jackson," she whispered, her voice strangled. He was at her side in an instant, his pilot's instincts reading her panic. He looked at the screen. His eyes tracked the lines of data. The color drained from his face. He read it once, twice. His hand went to his mouth, then slowly lowered. This is a mistake," he said, his voice hollow. "The scanner's damaged. The radiation from the nebula." "It is not a mistake," Lyra said, placing a hand on her still flat abdomen. A strange new sensation was there, a faint external pulse of warmth and music, not a biosong, but something akin to it. A new melody. Jackson stumbled back, crashing into a bulkhead. His face was a war of emotions. Shock, disbelief, a flicker of primal joy, immediately swamped by a tsunami of dread. "But you, they said you couldn't." "They were wrong," she said, awe finally breaking through the shock. "Or something has changed." She looked at him, seeing the fear in his eyes. "This is your child." The word child seemed to paralyze him. He slid down the wall to the floor, staring at his hands, the hands of a soldier, a killer, a man who had lost everything. "Oh God," he breathed. "Lyra, my life. It's a wreckage. I'm a wreckage. I'm not. I can't be." He couldn't say father again. The ghost of his lost family was suddenly in the room with them. A crushing presence. "This is different," she pleaded, moving to him. "This is us." But the veteran in him was already taking over, assessing the threat. "This changes everything," he said, his voice hardening into its old command tone. "A hybrid? Lyra, do you understand? The OTC, the Cathari, black market biolabs, every fringe warlord with an ego. They would pay a planet's ransom for you for it. We're not just hiding from my past anymore. We're carrying the most valuable, most hunted secret in the quadrant." The warmth of the discovery was freezing over, replaced by the icy reality he outlined. Their fragile dream of a quiet life evaporated. They were now custodians of a biological miracle, a treasure, and a target. Jackson stood up, his movements once again those of the captain. "We need to run. Further than I'd planned. There's a derelict deep space relay station, Outpost Theta 7-1. It's off every chart, a ghost. We can hole up there, figure this out." He looked at her, and the fear in his eyes was now for her, for the life inside her. "I won't let anything happen to you. To either of you." The twist was complete. Their salvation had become their greatest peril. The man who had run from his past as a father was now, suddenly and terrifyingly, thrust back into that role, and the woman defined by barrenness was now the vessel of an impossible, accelerating life. The emotional connection they'd forged was now tethered to a terrifying, wonderful and deadly new truth. Outpost Theta 7 was a corpse of civilization, a sprawling lattice of metal and shattered viewports adrift in a cold asteroid field. Jackson docked the Wanderlust in a mangled hangar with the expertise of a man used to entering tombs. The interior was a frozen, airless maze. He found a semi-intact sector, restored power to a life support bubble, and sealed them in. It was stark, cold, and safe, for now. The pregnancy progressed not in months, but in weeks, days. Lyra's body changed with a speed that was as miraculous as it was alarming. Her silver dermal patterns grew more vibrant, spiraling into new complex designs. A soft internal glow emanated from her. And she could feel the child, not just physically but empathically. It was a consciousness nascent but aware, broadcasting pulses of pure, unfiltered emotion, curiosity, warmth, and a profound sense of connection. It was a beacon of feeling in the sterile silence of the derelict station. Jackson watched her, a constant silent sentinel. He scavenged parts to reinforce their hideout, set up sensor nets in the asteroid field, and monitored every blip on the long-range scanner. But his primary focus was Lyra. He saw the wonder on her face as she communed with the life within, and it terrified him. This was the part he remembered, the hope, the anticipation, the part that came before the crushing void. One evening, as Lyra rested, she felt a spike of sharp anxiety from the child, mirroring her own. She found Jackson in the makeshift cockpit he'd rigged, staring blankly at a static-filled screen, the worn holopic of his late family in his hand. His shoulders were slumped, the weight of it all bowing him. "You are thinking of them," she said softly. He didn't jump. He just nodded, a slow, weary motion. "Her name was Sarah, my daughter was Lily, she was 4. She loved yellow. Really loved yellow." A ghost of a smile touched his lips and died. "I wasn't there, Lyra. I was on a deployment. A stupid, meaningless border skirmish. I got the message 2 weeks late." He crushed the holopic in his fist, not in anger, but in a futile attempt to contain the pain. "I failed them. By being away. By not protecting them." Lyra knelt before him, taking his clenched fist in both her hands. She gently pried it open and placed his palm flat against her abdomen. At that moment, the child within stirred. A strong, deliberate movement. A wave of pure, calming warmth radiated from the point of contact. Jackson gasped, his eyes widening. "Feel her," Lyra whispered. "She is not Lily. I am not Sarah. This is not the past." She held his gaze, her twilight eyes holding his. "You are here, Jackson. You are here. And she knows you. She feels your fear, and she wants to soothe it. She chose you. This impossible life chose you." A tear, single and trackless, escaped his hardened eye and traced the line of his scar. The dam broke. He leaned forward, his forehead touching hers, and he wept. Silent, shuddering sobs of grief finally released. Of guilt acknowledged, and of a hope so terrifyingly bright he had to mourn the man he was to make room for it. He cried for Sarah and Lily, and when he was done, he looked at Lyra, his eyes red but clear. "I'm scared," he admitted. "The soldier gone, just a man laid bare." "So am I," she said. "But we are scared together." He kissed her then, a kiss of promise, of commitment, of a future chosen in the heart of danger. He placed his hand back on her belly, now in wonder, not fear. "Hello in there," he murmured, his voice thick. "I'm your dad. I'm gonna get it right this time." In the days that followed, their bond solidified into something unbreakable. He talked to her belly, telling the child stories of Earth, of starships, foolishly trying to explain gravity wells. Lyra would sing the old Velen bio songs, and the child would respond with empathetic pulses of delight, causing her skin to shimmer in time. They named her Wellara, after Lyra's clutch sister, a touchstone to a home that had betrayed her, but whose love she wanted to honor. Jackson's strategic mind was now fully devoted to their survival. He used scrap to build a crude but functional med bay, preparing for a birth that could happen any day. He taught Lyra how to use a small holdout blaster he'd modified for her grip. "I hope you never need it," he said, his hand covering hers on the weapon. "But if anything gets past me, you protect her, no matter what." Lyra saw the father in him emerging, protective, resourceful, fiercely loving. He was building a cradle from salvage alloy when the long-range sensors pinged. A ship on the edge of the asteroid field, not a random scavenger. Its signature was muted, military grade. It was scanning. The piece was over. "They found the Wanderlust's trail," Jackson said, his face hardening into the captain's mask. But his eyes held a new fire. "They're here for you, for her." Panic threatened to choke Lyra. The child Alara radiated a spike of alarm. Jackson placed his hands on her shoulders, his grip steadying. "Listen to me. We have a plan. The station's old reactor core. I can rig it to overload. It'll give us a distraction. A pulse that will scramble their sensors and look like a catastrophic failure. We take the Wanderlust's secondary pod, the one I've been modifying. It's cramped, but it has stealth plating. We slip out in the chaos. Where will we go?" "Anywhere, everywhere." He kissed her fiercely. "We're a family. We run together." They worked in frantic tandem. Jackson prepared the reactor overload, a 20-minute timer that would give them a head start. Lyra gathered the few precious things. The now flourishing lament blossom, the resonance stone, the makeshift swaddling clothes Jackson had fabricated. She could feel the pressure in her body changing, a rhythmic tightening. "Not now," she begged silently. "Please, not now." As Jackson made the final connection at the reactor console, a searing pinpoint laser blast shot from a service conduit above. Striking the console, it exploded in sparks. Jackson was thrown back, his arm burned. From the shadows of the corridor, figures emerged. Not Cathari. Not pirates. Human. In sleek, black tactical gear devoid of insignia. Private military. OTC deniable assets. The leader, a woman with cold gray eyes and a hair-trigger posture, stepped forward, her rifle trained on Jackson. "Captain Reed, the Asset Recovery Division thanks you for your service," she said, her voice flat. "You led us right to the prize. The Velen anomalous specimen and its progeny." Jackson slowly rose, putting himself between the commandos and Lyra. "She's not a specimen." "Everything is a specimen, Captain. Or a commodity." The commando leader's eyes flicked to Lyra's pronounced belly. "A self-accelerating hybrid gestation. The biolabs on Cerberus Prime will pay a fortune to unravel that. Stand aside. This is your final paycheck." Jackson's hand inched toward his sidearm. "The only thing you're getting is a one-way ticket to hell." The leader smiled thinly. "We have the station surrounded. Your reactor trick is offline. It's over." Lyra felt a contraction, sharp and undeniable, grip her. She cried out, doubling over. The commandos tensed. Jackson saw his chance. In that split second of distraction, he moved. Chaos erupted. Jackson's draw was a blur. His first shot took the lead commando in the throat before her smile had faded. He dove behind a shattered console as the others opened fire, plasma bolts chewing through the ancient metal. "Lyra, to the pod! Now," he roared. Pain and terror warred in Lyra, but the imperative to protect Ilara won. She stumbled down a side corridor, toward the secondary hangar where the escape pod was hidden. Behind her, the sounds of battle were short, brutal, and professional. Jackson was outnumbered and outgunned, but he was fighting in a space he knew, using every shadow, every piece of cover. He wasn't trying to win. He was buying seconds. She reached the pod bay. The small teardrop-shaped craft sat there, its stealth plating a matte, non-reflective black. She scrambled up the short ladder, another contraction hitting her like a physical blow. She fell into the pilot's seat, gasping. The controls were simple, preset by Jackson. All she had to do was hit the launch sequence. A plasma bolt sizzled past the open hatch, striking the wall. A commando appeared at the bay entrance, rifle raised. Before he could fire, Jackson tackled him from behind, driving him to the ground in a savage struggle. More commandos poured into the bay. "Launch!" Jackson bellowed, pinning the commando down. "I won't leave you," Lyra screamed. "For her. Lyra, go!" His eyes met hers, filled with a love and a sacrifice so absolute it stopped her heart. He reached to his belt and slapped a small device, a remote trigger. "The reactor's still rigged. I've got a dead man switch, go." It was a lie or a bluff, but it made the commandos hesitate for a critical second. Lyra, sobbing, slammed her hand on the launch sequence. The pod's hatch hissed shut. Magneto launch rails engaged. Through the small viewport, she saw Jackson release the commando and sprint. Not toward her, but away. Drawing their fire, he leaped behind a bulkhead as plasma fire converged on him. The pod shot forward on the rails, catapulting out of the station into the silent, star-dusted void. The last thing she saw was Jackson turning, looking straight at the pod, a faint, sad smile on his lips. Then a massive, silent explosion blossomed from the heart of Outpost Theta 7, not the reactor. It was a shaped charge. He must have planted elsewhere. The station erupted in a fireball of rupturing decks and expanding debris, consuming the bay, the commandos, and him. A wave of debris rattled the pod, sending it spinning. Lyra's world was a whirl of stars and grief, so profound she thought it would kill her. Ilara, sensing the cataclysm, radiated a wave of such intense, panicked sorrow that it synced with Lyra's own. The shared pain was a feedback loop of agony, but the little pod held. Its stealth systems activated, making it a shadow against the explosion's aftermath. Drifting, and the birth could not be stopped. Alone in the cold, silent pod, drifting through the funeral pyre of the man she loved, Lyra gave birth. There was no one to help. Only the pre-programmed med unit that extended from the wall, offering sterile fields and basic instructions. She followed through a haze of physical pain and soul-crushing loss. It was a brutal primal struggle, set against the infinite, uncaring backdrop of space. And then she was there, in Lyra's arms. Tiny, perfect, skin of moonlit quartz etched with fine, glowing patterns that were a fusion of silver and a warm golden hue, a faint, downy covering of dark hair on her head. And when she opened her eyes, they were Jackson's eyes, deep human brown, full of a startling ancient awareness. She did not cry. She hummed, a soft resonant sound that vibrated through Lyra's body, a sound that was both a Velen biotone and a human lullaby. It was a song of arrival, of recognition, of love. Lyra wept, holding her daughter Ilara to her chest. She had lost everything. She had gained everything. On the pod's passive scanner, a new signal appeared. A ship emerging from the shadow of a large asteroid. Not an OTC vessel. Its design was unfamiliar, organic, and graceful. Like a bird of prey crafted from living wood and crystal, a Velen scout ship. They must have detected the hybrid biosignature, the unique energy of Alara's birth from light years away. They were here, her people, the ones who had cast her out. The pod, low on power, floated helplessly. The Velen ship moved closer, extending a tender beam. Lyra looked down at her daughter, who had stopped humming and was now looking at her with those deep, knowing eyes. She saw Jackson in them. She saw her own resilience. She saw a future that was utterly unknown. She made a decision. Not as a victim, not as an exile, but as a mother. She powered up the pod's comms, opened a channel to the approaching ship, and spoke in her native tongue. Her voice clear and strong, laced with a hardness learned from a human veteran. This is Lyra of Sealand Prime. I am aboard this vessel with my daughter. We require assistance. But understand this, we are not specimens. We are not a commodity. We are family. Approach accordingly. The interior of the Velen scout ship. The whispering stem was a haunting echo of home. Warm, fragrant air, living light, soft melodic tones vibrating through the hull. Lyra, cleaned and dressed in a fresh, simple tunic, sat in a softly lit chamber. Alara cradled against her chest. The child was asleep. Her tiny fingers curled around Lyra's silver-patterned thumb. The two scouts, Kieran and his partner Niev, moved with a reverent silence, their own dermal patterns pulsing with a mix of awe and profound shame. The High Chorus has been informed, Kieran said, his voice hushed. A ship of state is being dispatched. You will be brought to the first spire, given every honor. Your daughter will be cherished as a new melody in the great song. Lyra looked at him, her twilight eyes calm but unyielding. I do not wish for honor. I wish for safety. For her. You will have it, Niev said, her gaze fixed on Alara with wonder. No harm will come to her on Sealand Prime. She is a living miracle. She is a child, Lyra corrected gently but firmly. Her name is Alara. She will be raised as a child, not a miracle. She looked down at her daughter. Her father was a human, a soldier named Jackson Reed. He gave his life so that we could live. That is the first story she will know. Kieran bowed his head. It will be as you say, Lyra, you are her mother. The song flows through you now in a way we do not yet understand. Lyra felt a wave of exhaustion, but also a solid, unshakable core of strength. She had crossed the galaxy, been sold, rescued, loved, and shattered. From the pieces she had built this, a tiny humming life in her arms. She was no longer the broken instrument. She was the composer of a new, defiantly beautiful song. As the whispering stem began its long journey back to the core worlds, Lyra stood at the viewport, Alara in her arms. The stars streamed by, rivers of cold light, somewhere in that endless dark. The atoms of Outpost Theta 7 and the man she loved spun in a silent, eternal dance. She whispered to her daughter, We are going home, my love, but it will be a different home, one we make for ourselves. Alara stirred, her brown eyes opening. She looked at her mother, then at the stars, and let out a soft, contented hum, a sound that held the warmth of a human lullaby and the resonant depth of a Velen biochord. It was a promise, a beginning. And far away, in the quantum foam of a shattered singularity, in a place where physics bled into myth, a consciousness flickered, a pattern of memory and will, clinging to a single burning thought, a thought shaped like two names, a thought that was a beacon, a prayer, a sword being forged in the heart of a star. Lyra, Alara, I am coming home.